welcome back. My name is Josh Rogan. I'm a columnist with the Washington Post. Welcome to Panel 2, and thank you to the Canadian government for hosting us, and thank you to our esteemed honorable congressional delegation for attending, and thank you to Peter for making us the only thing standing between this crowd and the lobster dinner. I'm proud to say this is my 11th Halifax International Security Forum. And as I look around the room, I'm very heartened to see a lot of familiar faces. I'm also very happy to see some new faces, some people I hope to meet over the course of the next 2 days. Unfortunately, for those of you who are new, you won't be able to experience one of the early treats of the Halifax Forum, which is that Senator John McCain would give an impromptu comedic performance at the lobster dinner every night. But lucky for you, I preserved some of his jokes. You can say these with me if you remember them. What was funny about the McCain stand-up routine, of course, was not the jokes themselves, but the fact that he said the same ones every single year in a row. His most famous one was about his loss in the 2008 election. He said, after I lost my presidential election, I slept like a baby. Sleep for 2 hours, wake up and cry. Sleep for 2 hours, wake up and cry. He had a famous one about the two inmates standing on the chow line at the Illinois State Prison. One turns to the other and says, "You know, the food was a lot better here when you were governor." And then the final one, which I'm sure you guys all remember. What's the difference between a catfish and a lawyer? One is a scum-sucking bottom dweller, and the other is a fish. Yes, exactly, exactly. Actually, my favorite John McCain quote was when he would quote Chinese Chairman Mao Zedong. And McCain would often say, as Mao would say, it's always darkest before it goes completely black. Now, what was funny, of course, is Mao never said that. And John McCain knew he never said that. He wouldn't quote Mao Zedong, but he loved to misquote Mao Zedong. But I keep bringing up that line at every Halifax Forum because it keeps seeming to get more and more true. We live in a chaotic world. We live in a world where the crises are mounting, where Ukraine is fighting for its survival, Israel is under attack, American warplanes are squaring off against Iranian-backed militias, heightened tensions in the South China Sea. And when President Biden said last month, we are facing an inflection point in history, one of those moments where the decisions we make today are going to determine the future for decades to come, I think everybody in the room can understand that the gravity of that remark is only growing. In fact, it's not so different from what Xi Jinping said to Vladimir Putin just before he departed Moscow in March. He said, right now there are changes, the likes of which we haven't seen for 100 years, and we are the ones driving those changes together. This is not just an instance of he said, she said. No? Okay. They can't all be winners. Okay, there we go. It took a minute. The bottom line is that it seems as if, like it or not, we're entering into a bipolar world. It seems as if, like it or not, our adversaries are teaming up against us in Ukraine, in Israel, in Europe, and in the Pacific. Iran is arming Russia and Hamas. North Korea is exporting weapons to Russia and to use against Ukrainians. Russia and China are teaming up to help Hamas diplomatically. And China is helping Russia and Iran evade sanctions and continue their aggression. These conflicts are intertwined, and therefore our response, it would seem, needs to be intertwined. And that's what we're here to discuss today. And I couldn't imagine having a better panel to do it. Let me briefly introduce them. Ms. Masih Alinejad is an Iranian activist and president of the World Liberty Congress. Mr. Vincent Chow is the spokesman and director of the Democratic Progressive Party of Taiwan. Mr. Gary Kasparov is the chairman of the Human Rights Foundation in Russia. What I want to do is I want to give them each a chance to give us a situation report. It's a lot going on in the world, and I want them each to tell us just a little bit up front about what's going on in your movement with related to the country that you care about, and what does this professional crowd need to know, and then we'll get into a discussion, then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. Masih, let me begin with you. It's been about a year since thousands and thousands of brave Iranian women took to the streets to defend their rights. A year later, it's unquestionable that the situation has changed, that the mood has changed, the people are doing things in Iran that were unimaginable years ago. At the same time, the regime seems as entrenched as ever. Give us your honest take. What's the latest? What do we need to know?
It's beyond sad that last year when I was here, I was very, very hopeful that we're almost about to overthrow the regime. Not only to, save ourselves from this dictator, we were trying to save the whole world, because Iran is everywhere. The Islamic Republic is everywhere. So yes, the Islamic Republic actually killed more than 700 innocent protesters. They arrested more than 22,000 protesters, and they hanged 40 of them. So that is why the revolution, which is called Women, Life, Freedom, you don't see it in the streets, but we are actually seeing different phases of the revolution. The number of the women who actually practice their civil disobedience increased. Chinese cameras are everywhere to identify unveiled women. But women are actually, I'm very sorry, I have to say that, they're showing their middle fingers to the cameras and saying that we are here and this is our camera, we are filming you, where are you? So women are still fearless. They have nothing to lose. But at the same time, the Iranian regime are getting more brutal. Right at the anniversary of Mahsa Amini, they killed another 16-year-old girl, Armita Gravan, for the crime of showing their hair. I really want to repeat it. For the crime of showing, how many women are here? Hands up, honestly. How many? Imagine how many. If you go to my country, you get killed for showing your hair. This is the simple way to explain the situation in Iran. But I want to say that people are still hopeful. The revolution happened inside the heart of every single person that I talked to them. Even the family members of those people who got killed, they have hope. And they say that we will bring this regime down. And I remember that I want to say that the people still have agency to bring the regime down, but what actually helped the Islamic Republic to stay in power, it's like, the West didn't do anything. I'm not saying that the West didn't come and save us. No. But the West did its best to save the Islamic Republic when they were in crisis. First, handing out money. I remember that, I was going everywhere hearing that Prime Minister Trudeau, President Biden were saying that we stand with the people of Iran. And I was like, no, please sit down. We don't need you to stand. Sit down with your allies and make concrete decisions and actions to address Khamenei the way that you addressed Putin, to isolate this regime, because this regime is not going to just be a threat for Iranians. And what happened after last year when I warned the West, you see that now more drones being provided by the Islamic Republic to Putin to kill innocent Ukrainians, and the Islamic Republic sponsored Hamas to attack Israeli civilians. And I want to say that even Palestinian civilians getting killed, being used like a human shield, just because of the Islamic Republic. But I want to actually end up here that I still believe that Iranian women are leading one of the most prominent revolutions, and they are going to save the rest of the world from one of the most barbaric regimes.
Thank you. Before we move on, let me just quickly press you, because you've made somewhat of a serious charge here, that the West has not done its job in standing beside these women. And I'd like to know, here we are a year later, what are the specifics of what you would have all of these kind people do? Here you have assembled a group of very powerful Western officials. Be specific. What could be done now?
Very specific, very specific. It's a shame. It's a shame that the US government designated the Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization, but the US allies still hesitating to do this simple thing. And I want to say that Putin, Xi from China, and Khamenei, they're more united than democratic countries. So this is very specific things. First, criminalize the Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization. Second, in Canada, here, there are more than 700 Islamic Republic agents, the relative of those who say death to America, death to West. They're living here on their luxury lives. But the family members of those who got killed by the same members of Revolutionary Guards, they're being denied visa to come to Canada. So clearly, kick them out. Not because they are the threats for us Iranians, they are threats for democracy, for Canadians as well. These are specific things. And another thing that I want to say, which is very, very, it's not too much to ask, is it's a revolution led by women. I want to see women everywhere, everywhere. You see demonstrations now, pro-Palestine demonstrations everywhere. But where were you when women were getting killed in my country? Teenagers were getting killed and raped in prison. Women facing rape, just being women. Where were you? So I want women's march in Iran is bloody. I want to see all women to feel that if you don't help Iranian women to get rid of this religious dictatorship, this virus, they're going to be here and they're going to kill they're going to end democracy. If we don't get united to end the Islamic Republic, they will get united and they will end every single of you.
All right, well, that was very specific. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I asked for specifics. Get
Yeah,
specifics.
I was very clear. They're going to end all of you.
Vincent, let me turn to you. Taiwan. What is the current security situation of Taiwan? What do you see in terms of the latest in Chinese military, but also economic aggression? Is Beijing interfering in your upcoming election? And what would you recommend that we think and do about that?
Well, first of all, thank you, Josh. And for those that don't know, Josh has done incredible reporting on Taiwan, and I'm sure he will earn his place on China's blacklist soon, if not already. Perhaps
fingers crossed.
Peter one day. Fingers crossed again. The truth of the matter is we have about 50 odd days into our elections on January 13th. You know, I should be in Taipei. Nothing was going to keep me away from my Halifax lobster dinner, so I've made my choice. But I think we should look at it this way, sort of in the post-election period and the prior to the election period. So let me start with kind of the prior to election period. So over the past 2 years or so, we've seen a number of things. We've seen, first of all, military adventurism in the Taiwan Strait, unprecedented amounts of Chinese fighter jets, Chinese naval vessels encircling Taiwan, bringing military pressure against Taiwan, eroding the very concept of the center line. So this is all well documented. It's out there. Second issue, economic sanctions against Taiwanese agricultural products in particular. This has been very targeted. So the Chinese are very sophisticated nowadays. They don't enact blanket bans. They look at political pressure points. They look at communities that are friendlier towards the administration. They look at communities that may vote a certain way, and they enact economic actions in response to that. That's the second part. The third part is really sowing division and disunity within our society, bringing disrepute, bringing criticism against our government institutions and democratic institutions. And this is the very nature of the CCP, I mean, in fact. Now, just now we are heading again into the final stretches of the election, and things have somewhat shifted. So everything I spoke about earlier, that was maybe in the prior to September period. Right now, we're seeing a much more sophisticated campaign focused on three major tenets: disinformation, disinformation, and disinformation. They know that military actions, economic actions ultimately backfire. I mean, they've backfired in the past. So what they're focused on right now is spreading disinformation within our societies that focus on one thing: undermining support for this current administration. Now, they have a finger on the scale. I mean, they have to be. They have one desired outcome in this election. I'm not going into that. But the truth of the matter is that it's a whole society effort. So I'll give one example, and this is very, very telling. So there's a front page newspaper article just a few weeks ago, a few months at this point, about the US pressuring Taiwan to build what? Build bioweapons. Build bioweapons in Taiwan.
Oh my God.
Now,
is that true? Is that fake news?
I think we could probably ask anybody in this room here.
You know about that? No. It's a no comment from me.
I would assume that our esteemed senators here would know something about the United States government pressuring Taiwan to build bioweapons. And this is the truth of the matter, is that it was very sophisticated disinformation. The telltale signs were no longer there. I mean, they still were, but they weren't as apparent as years past.
So it's not true.
It's obviously not true.
Got it. Very good. Just making sure.
You would have a scoop for the next column of yours if it was. But the point is that they're not going to convince everybody, but they're going to convince somebody. And that's the danger that they bring to any democracy, not only in Taiwan, but around the world. And so we're hyper-focused on this prior to the election, and we hope, as President Biden recently said during APEC, that China not only respects our democracy, but does not put a finger on a scale in influencing our vote. And we hope that takes place.
So President Biden said in his press conference that he told Xi Jinping not to interfere.
This was, I think, an unnamed administration official.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Shared this with the press, that Joe Biden, President Biden, had told Xi Jinping that the Chinese should not interfere with our election and they should respect our democracy.
And what you're saying is that ship has already sailed.
I'm saying that that ship has sailed, but we forever remain hopeful.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Gary, let me turn to you. Russia, Ukraine. I mean, it will be the subject of every panel this weekend, but from your perspective as a human rights defender, from your perspective as a dissident, what do you think is most important for these esteemed audience members to know about the current state of affairs?
I don't know where to start, so I can say probably that I'm incorrigible optimist by nature, but my natural optimism has been tested lately. My first article about existential threat from Vladimir Putin to the free world dated back to January 4, 2001 in the Wall Street Journal. That was the year where President Bush looked deep into Putin's soul and found something there. And Senator McCain wisely said that looking at Putin, you should only look at his forehead and see 3 capital letters, KGB. Vladimir Putin, as every dictator before him, always lies about what he did. But very often, as every dictator before him, he tells us what he's going to do. We should remember that Mein Kampf was published in 1925, and that was a blueprint. But who paid attention to a leader of a small nationalistic party in Germany? And who could have imagined that 8 years later they would be in power? Vladimir Putin made all these statements being in power. So back in 2005, he said the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. Was it clear? Yeah, I'm not sure Putin already was convinced that he could deliver on his promises, but that was in his mind. Every statement Putin did from the very beginning, by the way, his first act as president of Russia was to restore Soviet national anthem. You say symbolic, absolutely. Symbolism, that's in the core of every dictatorship. So his intentions were very clear. It was about opportunity, and the free world offered him these opportunities. Just again, not to be mistaken, back in 2007, at the Munich Security Conference, looking into the eyes of the leaders of the free world, Vladimir Putin said, NATO must go back to 1997 borders. Didn't he? Response? Nothing. Next year, just to prove that he was not just throwing words, he attacked the Republic of Georgia. The reaction? Nothing. By the way, it's in a few years after this invasion, I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, and I said the next would be Ukraine. They asked me, how did I know? I said, I looked at the map. And again, I believe Vladimir Putin. We have to believe dictators. By the way, when you look at the list of their promises, they keep delivering on them. When people say, Iran, oh, it's for domestic consumption, they want to destroy the state of Israel. No, they want to destroy the state of Israel.
Yeah.
This is very much the policy. So that we made this mistake in the 30s of the last century. We're making this mistake now. And Vladimir Putin is very serious. So in 2014, after annexation of Crimea, I was dead sure he would go for the whole Ukraine. Why? Because he said it. Because Russian propaganda 24/7 kept saying that. Ironically, nobody wanted to hear that. I wrote the book, Winter is Coming, Why Vladimir Putin and Enemies of Revolt Must Be Stopped back in 2015. The reception was quite timid. Yeah, I was viewed as, oh, it's a Russian radical. Of course, you know, he hates Putin. And yeah, yes, I have reasons to hate Putin. Yeah, but it was not a threat just to us. My great friend and ally, late Boris Nemtsov, had been repeating time and again, Vladimir Putin was our problem. But if you did nothing, he would be everybody's problem. Back in 2005, 2006, 2007, the years where Vladimir Putin could have been stopped. So we did nothing, and Vladimir Putin built his military presence. And I was quite shocked, you know, when people still discussed whether Putin would attack Ukraine or not, when he brought 200,000 troops, surrounded Ukraine from north, east, and south, brought half of his Pacific fleet from Vladivostok to Black Sea, and was still debating, is it, you know, it's a bargaining chip for negotiations. You don't have to ask anyone, you know, political pundit here. Listen to Russian propaganda 24/7 since 2014. They kept repeating, Ukraine was not a state, Ukrainian nation was not a real nation, we have to assimilate them, They kept saying that, and Vladimir Putin, as every dictator, had to deliver on his promise. What's happened? Nothing happened. So should I remind esteemed audience, you know, so many top brass here, on February 2nd, 2022, last year, General Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified on the Hill and said that you argued against giving Ukraine any weapons, didn't he? It's in the record. Why? Because the Ukrainian army would be destroyed in 2 weeks. And the weapons would end up in the hands of Russians. I found it a little bit cynical, coming from someone who 6 months earlier left tens of billions worth of American weapons in the hands of Taliban. But that's what was expected. What was the CIA forecast for Kyiv? 96 hours. So that's why when we are applauding now NATO unity, we should remember it's cemented by Ukrainian blood.
Yes.
And the same leaders who are now debating how to help Ukraine would be sitting and negotiating with Putin, trying to salvage pieces of Ukraine. No doubt about it. Ukraine, for Biden administration, was a bargaining chip in the negotiations, alongside with Iran. Iranian deal was a part of that. And Ukraine was there, so losing part of Ukraine would not be a problem. And by the way, tell me, I'm a Russian, I'm earned rights to be paranoid. Tell me that as we speak now, Jake Sullivan and Bill Burns are not negotiating with Russians the partition of Ukraine. Anybody is willing to say that now, just it's not happening? It is happening. Because this administration doesn't want Ukraine to win. That's very clear. Because the war could have won a year ago. Why are we talking about $60 billion or $100 billion package? The weapons that Ukraine needs to win the war are collecting dust in American storage. Thousands of tanks, ATACMS, F-16s, Grey Eagle drones, it's all sitting there. But the great strategists are calculating distance for ATACMS not to reach the bridge. Because Bill Burns promised Russians not to attack the bridge and not to interfere with Russian, as he called, domestic affairs. So this is a sad truth. That's why we don't hear Ukraine must win. My apology for Canadian minister who said it today. But Americans always say we'll stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. The phrase is not finished because it could be we stand with Ukraine as long as it takes for us to make a deal with Moscow. So all
right, Gary, let's.
Oh, okay, fine.
That's enough to chew on, and I'm not going to try to fact check that whole thing.
Just to finish.
Yeah.
Just to finish
really?
that
Okay.
regarding Russia.
Right.
So I always say that this. You don't expect changes in Russia before Ukrainian flag is raised in Sevastopol. And my only wish is the Russian men will have half of the courage of Iranian women.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. You'll have another chance, I promise, to talk. I'm not going to fact check that all, but just point out very quickly that the administration does not acknowledge that it's negotiating with Russia. The partition, they would contest that. We're going to leave it. We're going to leave it there.
Yeah. Not denying. Can't deny it.
Okay. Well, I can't. I'm not in a position. I'm just.
Ask him.
Just for the record, that's not been established. But anyway, let's move on. Okay. So, what I want to do with the next piece of this panel here is to tease out the actual task that we're here to do, which is to prove, to show, to persuade people that these conflicts are linked. It's not enough to just say it. We have to show it. Okay. We have to produce the evidence. And so, why not take this time we have here today? First, I'm going to, same order. First, I'm going to ask you, Masi, to tell us from your perspective, from your expertise, how Russia and China are interfering in the Iran issue. Then I'm going to ask Vincent to answer how Russia and Iran are interfering in the Taiwan issue. And then I'm going to ask Gary to talk about how Iran and China are interfering in the Russia issue. And let's give real evidence, real examples to prove the case that the CRINKs, erase that, the CRINKs. I apologize. That was an innocent mistake. Is a real thing. Go.
CRINKs?
Yes.
I mean, honestly, when I heard the word CRINKs from Peter, I was like, this should go viral on TikTok, not Osama bin Laden's letter to America. That breaks my heart. As a woman coming from Middle East, CRINKs, see, Islamic Republic is in the middle. Like, whether the war is in the heart of Europe, Islamic Republic is in the middle. Whether it's Hamas, Islamic Republic is in the middle. The money from poor people, which suffering from poverty, lack of electricity, lack of water in Iran, goes to the proxies in the Middle East and goes to provide drones to Putin to kill innocent Ukrainians. So CRINKs, it's the real problem. And I have to say that it breaks my heart more because when I see that how dictators are making, creating an alliance of, the network that they're creating, helping each other, providing technology for surveillance, for censorship, how to spread fake news, misinformation, disinformation, how to use even social media. This is how dictators are helping. Russian dictators are helping the Islamic Republic and providing cameras, which is everywhere, as I mentioned, everywhere in Iran, to identify unveiled women. When we asked the Iranian regime that why you never identified those who killed 1,500 innocent protesters only in 3 days, they say that we couldn't find them. But they have cameras to find women if they show their hair. So this camera is being provided by the Chinese government. And as we see, there's a contract between Russia, agreement between Russia and Iran for 20 years. Agreement between China and Islamic Republic for 20 years. Recently, there's another agreement between Iranian regime and Bolivian government that how Islamic regime provide military aid for Bolivian government. So we see that revolutionary guards are everywhere, everywhere. But lack of actions from the other side, democratic countries, is actually emboldening Iranian regime to do whatever they want to do. So I'm sure that about the deal, Gary mentioned it very well. The deal is there, and how they want to get successful, they go after dual national citizens. It's not just these it's very sad that you see that Swedish citizens, like a German citizen, UK citizen, British citizen, US citizens are being used like bargaining chip in Iran to bring all the government on the table to negotiate with them. So this is how dictators are like helping each other, supporting each other to oppress people inside Iran. Another thing that they're really good at transnational repression, targeting their own dissidents beyond their own borders. I myself, I'm a survivor of assassination plot. And the guy who actually got arrested in front of my house in Brooklyn with AK-47 was part of a Eastern Europe criminal gang. So this is the reality. The dictators are really like helping each other and backing each other to oppress not only their own people, to oppress the people outside their own borders as well.
And before we move on, if I could just ask you to talk a little bit about the Russian-Iranian partnership in Syria. We talk a lot about the partnership in Ukraine, but for 12 years, the Russians and the Iranians have been joining together to commit atrocities in Syria. What should we learn from that?
Look, it was Bashar Assad publicly announced that we get our money from the Islamic Republic. And the president of the Islamic Republic, Hassan Rouhani, one time said that although we are suffering from sanction, this is what they put the blame always on the West. He said, although we are suffering from sanction, but we are proud to say that we are helping Bashar Assad, we are sending money to Hassan Nasrallah as well. So this is very clear to Iranians. And there was massive protests in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Iran. The main slogan was against the Islamic Republic, sending money to the proxies. In Syria, it was clear, and Qasem Soleimani, who got killed by the US government, he was there. He was there, killing innocent children there. But I was shocked when he got killed by the US government. What happened? Suddenly on the mainstream media, journalists, CNN, Channel 4, everywhere, calling him national hero. So these are the things that we have to talk. People in the Middle East, they know the roots of all the crises are the Islamic Republic. But people in the West are lost, or actually maybe buying time, I don't know, to get the deal and like negotiating with the killers.
Thank you. Vincent, from Taipei's perspective, what is the involvement of the Iranians and the Russians in the overall effort to help China achieve its aims vis-a-vis Taiwan?
Well, let me quickly lay out a scenario. What happens if Russia wins in Ukraine tomorrow? 3 immediate things happen. First one is that authoritarian regimes anywhere in the world are emboldened by the demise of democracy. Second, it showcases that democracies are disunited. I mean, we're just not united when it comes to solving common issues, for example, the defense of democracies. Third, it heightens the CCP's claim that unification is essentially inevitable and that the people of Taiwan should learn to accept this. Now, the opposite is almost exactly true as well. So let's go into this a bit further. First of all, this idea of democracies versus authoritarian regimes. Now, I tend to not like this phrase, great power competition between China and Russia. And for a simple reason, because it's not about China and Russia. It's not about, China and the United States. It's about really democracies and authoritarian regimes. I mean, this idea that it's just about China and the United States, number one, gives the impression that other democracies don't have agency in this. And then number two, we don't have a stake in this, which are both not true. I mean, I would say that from Taiwan's perspective, we have a greater stake than anybody in the United States because China is threatening us on the front lines. And that it may one day lead to a Chinese threat on American borders, but right now the threat is on our borders. And so we're cognizant of that. Now, so to take that into a further point, when we look at this idea of authoritarian regimes and democracies, why CRINK is a thing, and there's growing pains associated with that word, I understand. But why CRINK is a thing is that because authoritarian regimes are standing together. I mean, it's not an idea about China and Taiwan or Russia and Ukraine or Iran versus most of the global community, but it's an idea they find unity and strength. And this idea that by finding unity and strength, they further bring about disunity amongst Western democracies. So that's the point I wanted to draw. But more deeply into this idea about how it impacts China and Taiwan. So we have to understand that the key thing keeping peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait really is this idea that the risk and cost of Xi Jinping taking action must never be lower than the risk and cost of him not taking action. So to say, the risk and cost of Xi Jinping taking action must remain astronomically high, and the risk and cost of him not taking action must remain astronomically low. And we're going to achieve the latter, for example, in Taiwan, by maintaining the status quo, by maintaining our current constitutional order, by not engaging provocatively with the Chinese. That's basically what this administration has been doing over the past 8 years. But we're also going to have to keep our risk and cost for the Chinese astronomically high by engaging in effective defense reform, by uniting our society around a common threat we face, and then number three, by working with international partners to show deterrence. And so Ukraine throws a wrench in all of that. So for example, if Russia is successful in Ukraine, number one, it shows that the democratic community probably isn't coming to Taiwan's defense. I mean, keep in mind that the challenge of resupplying and supporting Taiwan is astronomically greater than Ukraine. I mean, the cost to the international economy and supply chains are going to be multitudes greater in a conflict over the Taiwan Strait. So if the Western community, if democracies can't come together to support Ukraine, what does that say about Taiwan? And what does that say to China? And what is the message the CCP receives? So all of this is tied together in that sense. When we think about risk and cost, Ukraine has to factor into it. And risk and cost is ultimately the only thing that rationally keeps Taiwan safe.
Excellent, assuming that Xi Jinping is a rational actor.
Well, no, it's an entirely irrational part. I mean, this gentleman said it best. I mean, Xi Jinping has already made clear, not only in his letter on the 40th anniversary to the Taiwanese compatriots, also in the 2022 August New Era White Paper on Taiwan, that unification is the only desired outcome. It's the only allowed outcome. And that peacefully, if possible, but by force if necessary. And all of this is correlated not only to the legitimacy of the CCP and the national rejuvenation of the so-called Chinese nation itself, but also the political legitimacy of Xi Jinping himself, particularly as he goes into the third and fourth term. So there's absolutely no reason for us to not take this at face value. And if we do take it at face value, again, as we should, then again, risk and cost is the only thing that is going to bring about a sustainable peace in the Taiwan Strait.
Excellent, thank you. Just to steer back to the topic a little bit, Russia, China, Iran, how does that union of actors impact the work that you do, Gary?
First of all, I love the word CRINK. It sounds sleazy. So that's, yeah, I'm not sure, but it's good. You know? The only problem is it's missing Venezuela.
Yes.
So we have to remember that there's another member of this CRINK, whatever it is. So that find a way to install this V there. And by the way, this when we talk about all these potential hotspot on the map, please at one point we should talk about Venezuela, Guyana, the Crimean-style referendum that Maduro is preparing now. Obviously, with some whispers from Moscow. So again, they work together. And we should not be mistaken by the fact that it's a small group. As Senator Shaheen said, there are only 4 or 5 of them, and we are many. Yeah, but they are devoted. We got 40 countries helping Ukraine, but Russia's military budget is over 20% of GDP. So that's why, again, Russia is small, compared to the global economy. but it was 20 officially, probably it's more now. So that's why, again, we should recognize that dictators now are just fully, it's just not united. They know what is at stake. I'm not sure we do. So, and also, we should remember, dictators never ask why. It's always about why not. And I agree. It's about the cost. So I can bet my bottom dollar that the last doubts about attack on Ukraine in Putin's head had disappeared when he watched the video of Americans stampeding Kabul. That's it, you know. What can you expect from these people? So, off go.
Understood.
So,
Let's pause there. And let me move to the next question because we're running a little bit low on time. I'm sorry, did you have a closing thought?
It's about this cooperation. I mean, as for cooperation, Russia and Iran, we know that. But it's not just, you know, Iran supplying drones. So Russia has been supplying Iran with nuclear technologies for decades. And also, you know, it's this, no doubt, who was behind Hamas attack? It was a very sophisticated attack. And by the way, simple question. Israelis had all the cameras there. How they could have missed such an operation, you know, well prepared with all the details, with Delta plans? It means they had another training base. And I bet you it was a training base that was protected from American surveillance. So I guess it's not just Iran. And also, Hamas used very sophisticated drones to actually to destroy Israeli defense. So what countries are cooperating now closely creating drones? Ukrainian friends can tell you that every week they come up with some new improvements, Russia and Iran. So again, it's just, you can find them all over the place. As for China, I think it's a nuance here. So yes, China is behind them, but China does not get involved directly. Obviously, China is encouraging Central Asian nations. So just recently there was an article, you know, I sent information to Globe and Mail about Canadian electric detonators for mines being shipped to Russia via Kyrgyzstan. Welcome, thank you very much. So, or French gunpowder via Kazakhstan. China is definitely behind it. But I think the Xi Jinping is trying to actually see, you know, what's best for him. Attacking Taiwan could be costly. But don't forget, there's one country that China looks as, you know, as at a potential prey. The Chinese official claims to Russia, they amount to 1.5 billion square kilometers. The entire territory from Vladivostok, which by the way is no longer Vladivostok on Chinese maps, in Haixiamin, to Lake Baikal, was China until 1860. So that's why I think he's just, you know, he's happy to see the war going on, because potentially instead of going for a rocky island, which is armed to the teeth, and potentially having American aircraft carriers, he has a much better opportunities in the north. So but of course right now, he's trying to gain all the advantages. And I want to remind anybody that the signature of a dictator on a treaty is not worth of paper. It's put on.
Understood, thank you. Before we go to questions, I really want to take some time to tackle what I think is a very often heard and in some cases legitimate critique of this idea. And I think if we want to be honest about what's going on in our politics and our societies, there's a lot of fatigue with internationalism. It seems clear that the benefits of globalization were not distributed equally inside of democracies. It seems clear that there's a rising dissatisfaction with intervention and a rising dissatisfaction with internationalism amongst the youth. And I'm wondering if we can, first of all, answer those criticisms. Are we biting off more than we can chew? Are we creating the thing that we are fearing by grouping these countries together? In other words, are we creating a self-fulfilling prophecy? And why is it that you think that so many young people in democracies, in both the right and the left, are very skeptical of this idea and this project? And I'd like to start with you, Masi.
I think because the leaders who can actually lead the youth are trying to be politically correct. And being politically correct, they are lost. That is why we're losing democracy here as well. I mean, honestly, think about it. I want to get back to the example that I said. The letter to America from Ben Laden is going viral. The youth are talking about this. It just reminds me of like the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei sent a letter to America as well. So imagine like 4 years later, his letter goes viral among the youth, your children. How do you feel? Like these are, you know, the people that they can easily kill women for being women. But now they became like heroes in America. So this is very dangerous. We are coming from countries that we didn't take democracy for granted. That's why we are worried about the situation here in the West. So I want to use the opportunity to say that, like the dictators are, we talk about CRINKs, all the dictators, they don't share anything, like no ideology, no culture. They don't have anything in common. They only have one thing in common, being anti-democratic. So why the democratic countries that our values do not get us united? Well, we did recently, that's why I want to use the opportunity, we did recently, alongside Gary Kasparov and Leopoldo Lopez, opposition leader from Venezuela, we created new initiative called World Liberty Congress. Instead of watching United Nations, that how these dictators are voting for each other, electing each other, which making the United Nations like a place for dictators, uniting all the dictators, we try to unite all the freedom fighters, all the dissidents and leaders from 52 autocracy, 52 authoritarian regimes. And we actually invited 200 dissidents in Lithuania last week. Guess what? We were all coming from different cultures, different countries, miles away from each other, but we were all shared the common values. And we were like, this is the place that we have to invite democratic leaders to come and hear us, to listen us, and to understand that we are not just fighting for ourselves. Democracy should be protected in the West as well. And that's why I'm worried. That's why maybe Gary Kasparov said that people for years and years saying that he's very radical. People calling me that I'm a very loud woman. I'm being proud to be a loud woman in the face of these clerics killing us. Yes. Thank you so much. And I want you to join us to the CRINK community and to the World Liberty Congress community and help us to protect democracy. That's all I need.
Thank you, Vincent. I was engaged in a debate at a university last week about whether or not we should defend Taiwan, and the university students voted against it. And to be sure, that may say something about my debating skills, but it also, I think, says something about young people today. What do you think about this, and what do you think can or should be done to bring the next generation along and to persuade them that this is a project worth continuing?
Well, first of all, I would say to them that defending Taiwan is not their responsibility. Defending Taiwan is our responsibility, and we're firmly committed to that. I mean, over the past 8 years, our GDP per defense spending has gone up from 1.78% to about 2.5%. In real dollar terms, it's gone up over 50%. We've revived conscription back from 4 months back to 12 months. We've engaged in defense reform. We've brought in new capabilities. We're building our new indigenous defense submarines for the first time ever. I mean, all of these actions are supposed to showcase one thing, which is that defense, again, is our own responsibility. And it's great. It's fantastic for international partners to chip in, and it's helpful for them to do so. And like I said, I mean, if we're talking about cost and risk, there's no single greater cost and risk that can be introduced than international partners saying that they have a stake here in the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait. But ultimately, the responsible party is ours. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is this, is that we're not asking for partners to chip in for Taiwan's security while not giving back to others. Let me put it back to Ukraine, for example. On Ukraine, we're the first Asian country to send a medical team to Ukraine. Where probably the highest amount of humanitarian aid from anywhere in Asia has come from Taiwan, the people of Taiwan. We've donated power generators, school buildings, housing to place cities across Ukraine. Our Taiwanese citizens have bled and died with their brothers and sisters in Ukraine fighting for freedom. And we're putting together a reconstruction package, about $90 to $100 million US right now in our legislature to support the reconstruction of Ukraine. I mean, these are things that the people of Taiwan are doing because we firmly believe what we are saying, which is that democracies stand together and is ultimately a two-way street.
Excellent. Thank you. Gary, the last time the House voted on Ukraine aid, a majority of House Republicans voted against it. And that's 117 House Republicans voted against it. They're responding to their base. What do you think is, how did it get to this point? And what do you think can or should be done to make the argument to young conservatives in particular that the Ukraine project is something worth supporting?
No, I think it's the same kind of ignorance as on the left about Israel or Hamas. Because it's quite ironic. I already said it, but I can clarify it. Whatever is $60 billion or $100 billion, this is not money given to Ukraine. The lion's share of this money goes to American military manufacturers because it replenishes the stock. What Ukraine needs is something that's sitting in the stock now. Tanks, F-16s, ATACMS, Grey Eagle drones. It's sitting there. And it's not, what the Pentagon is using. It's in the storage, collecting dust. So the money will be paid to American manufacturers. By the way, it's quite ironic that most of American defense industries are in the red states. It's quite. I never I never checked, exactly how the members of the House voted. But most of the money will end up in places like Arkansas or Louisiana. So that's again, that's what you can find out. So very little, by the way, goes to Idaho and New Hampshire. I just checked it before I ended the stage. So
Sure, it's spread around.
I just saw the recent polling done in Iowa. Actually, this is quite conservative state. And again, it's about the question you ask. Because again, it's one of the problems people don't understand why we're fighting in Ukraine. This is the key. So this is, what is the goal? Because if it's a war, so it should be the goal. In 1943, in January, in Casablanca, FDR and Churchill publicly said, unconditional surrender. And don't tell me that the Wehrmacht in 1943 was a less formidable force than Putin's ragtags. So in 1943, before the end of battle in Stalingrad, Japan was there, Italy was there, unconditional surrender. That's a strategic goal. So if you know what you're fighting for, then there will be a solution. There is a will, there is a way. But as of today, it gets very unclear. As long as it takes, it's not the right message. So I believe that if people are given clarity about the American goals, why it's important, connecting Taiwan, Israel, bringing it together, that's how we can actually sell it to the American public. Again, because everything I saw from the polling depends on the questions, how you do that. And of course, you can easily turn it around. Just changing a few commas and a few letters, you can get the result you want. And again, at the end of the day, it's not about money that's being voted by the House. Administration can decommission these weapons, put $1 tag, and send it to Ukraine. Again, if there's a will. I can remind you that it's from June 22nd, 1941, when Hitler attacked Soviet Union, to the end of this year, America sent to Soviet Union to Stalin, 360,000 tons of weapons, ammunition, and food. 360,000 tons at a time where the Nazis controlled the entire Europe, and the Arctic route was infested by German submarines, and Luftwaffe was in there. Still, if there is a way, if there's a will, there's a way.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We do have time for questions. I'm going to ask you to tell us who you are, who you work for if you'd like, and if you have a comment, just put it in the form of a question. And we'll start down here in front, Mr. Peter McKay, who has been referred to as the Canadian John McCain.
Not in that class, John. Thank you very much, Josh, and Gary, Massey, Vincent, Ehud. Wonderful to have you here. Your passion and this platform coincide very well. My very specific question, we have two democracies under threat or under attack. We have two aspiring, let's call them, democracies, held back. Countries sometimes like Ukraine need weapons, but Massey, I was struck by the comment that you made about how regimes are emboldened by silence and a lack of cohesion from Western countries in terms of the message and the words. We've had leaders on the ground in Russia, Navalny, Kara-Murza,
Not in jail, not on the
in
ground.
jail or dead.
In debt,
In Iran, it's clearly more difficult to have leaders emerge inside the country, but what more can we do other than bringing a cohesive message of support to rally support within your country, within Russia, because the people in the street will be the primary beneficiaries, but it's the democratic world that is going to benefit from a democratic Iran and a democratic Russia.
Okay, great. We're going to ask for short answers so we can get to as many as possible. First Masi and then Gary.
Yeah, that's a very good question, especially dictators are really good at killing hope within the country, telling women that you're being forgotten, you're being like ignored by the Western country, by democratic countries, especially like women sacrificing their lives. And you see that many female politicians going to visit the same dictators, wearing hijab, bowing to the same dictators. You can do a lot by showing to the women within the country in Iran that no, by what I said politically correct, don't be politically correct. Islamic Republic is a terrorist regime. They have only one name. Use the name, gender apartheid. And I want all of you to join us, women of Iran, women of Afghanistan, to expand the definition of apartheid in all international law and include gender as well. And that is going to make our work easy to end gender apartheid. Believe me, I don't want any Western countries to help us, to save us. I want them to stop saving the Islamic Republic, and they can do a lot. By first, naming Islamic Republic as a gender apartheid. Second, by supporting pro-democracy and freedom fighters within the country and outside Iran. And third, Canadian government. Criminalize Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. They are terrorists.
Thank you. Gary, quickly.
Yeah, it's as we can see, it's in the absence of secondary sanctions, Putin found ways of selling his oil, gas, and rebuilding his industry. Unfortunately, again, we don't have time, but I can show you the numbers. It's the Russian military production is higher than ever now. But there's one resource Vladimir Putin cannot replace: brains. So instead of just imposing sanctions on all Russians, you should have a policy of inviting engineers and financiers out of Russia. I told my American friends, if you had a chance in 1942, invite German engineers, issue them visas, scientists. Would you do that? In a heartbeat. What's standing on the way now? All you need is basically a recognized group of Russians. There are many of us. As I say, Russia has no deficit in de Gaulle's. There are many of us. So with more authority than Colonel de Gaulle in June 1940. The problem is lack of Churchills on the other side. So, and offer chance for these hundreds of thousands, you don't need probably millions, of Russians to get out. And what I say, join the other Russia. So the pin on my lapel now, it's our flag. We just remove the red stripe on the bottom, no more blood on Russian flag. This is a symbol of Russian opposition. Help us to create the other Russia. So maybe it's 1 million people, but again, it's a quasi-state. But make sure the people who are making Putin's weapons and helping his economy to stay afloat, they will get out. Because this is the only resource he cannot replace. It's about winning the war, and war is about logistics.
Excellent. Thank you. Right here in the front, I have in blue.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Sakeb, and I'm from Afghanistan. Masi, thank you so much for mentioning the women of Afghanistan. And I just wanted to remind everybody that in 2001, when the world came together to kick out Taliban, the regime who were supporting Osama bin Laden, the terrorist, and their terrorist group, they kicked out Taliban from Afghanistan. They brought women into the platforms, into the conferences. Women were running for office, for presidential election even. Women were athletes. So we had a life, and we hope for a better future for our country. 20 years afterwards, they killed Osama bin Laden. They brought Taliban back into power, and they handed our fate into the hands of these terrorist regime who are practicing gender apartheid in Afghanistan right now. So I wanted to ask you this question: how do you see the future of the women's revolution in Iran, considering what had happened in Afghanistan?
That's why I believe that, my sister, we, the women in the Middle East, we have to lead the rest of the world. Honestly, because we're alone. We are alone. I mean, imagine, I'm going to have a simple question here. Imagine if it was not women of Afghanistan, if it was women here in Canada being kicked out from a school, what would have been the reaction of the world? If it was not women of Iran getting killed for showing their hair, for simply walking unveiled, it was women in America getting killed for practicing their right, basic rights, what would have been the reaction of the rest of the world? So I want you to do the same. Imagine if it was not women of Iran and Afghanistan being kicked out from a stadium just because of being women. FIFA would kick out any countries if they don't allow women. But now, FIFA is helping the Islamic Republic, the gender apartheid regime, every single year. And when we say boycott Iran, ban Islamic Republic, kick them out, people say, shh, no, you know, this is not politically correct that we are banning Iran. No, we are not banning Iran. We are banning Islamic Republic. We are banning Taliban. We are not banning Afghanistan. So that's why I believe that, my sister, we have each other. We have to call everyone to join us. Where are the global feminist movement? Where are the Women's March, which took place everywhere for women of Iran and Afghanistan? We have to be louder and louder and call everyone to join us. As I said, legally help us to expand the definition of apartheid to include gender in all international laws. That's how we can actually kick them out from everywhere.
Excellent, thank you. This will have to be the very last question. Lobsang.
Oh, thank you. As Marcy said, CRINKs has 4 countries. But Marcy said there are 50-some autocratic countries.
Yes.
I think all of them are trying to follow a philosophy or ideology that they want to replace the present world order and follow the Chinese world order. Now, Xi Jinping made it very clear what is Chinese world order. Global Belt and Road Initiative, global security, global development, global civilization initiative. And said, in 70 years of Communist Party of China, they have never occupied an inch of foreign land. I'm Tibetan, my Uyghur friends are here, and then Mongolians will all testify that even in the footage, it was not shown, that Han Chinese occupied or inhabited areas only 40%. 60% of present day's map of China were inhabited by other people like Tibetans, Uyghurs, and Mongolians, right? So it's an expansionist ideology. And when there's a global security, it means global surveillance. When there's a global development, it means profit of them and loss for others. So I would like, our spokesman person from Taiwan to expand a bit on what is Chinese world order. If it replaces the present world order, how threatening and dangerous it could be for the rest of the world, particularly for Taiwan immediately.
Excellent, thank you.
That's a great question. And I think it really goes down to how clear we are, our clarity in terms of the CCP's intentions. And the CCP, I think, has always made quite clear that, number one, that they intend to take Taiwan back peacefully again, if possible, but by force if necessary. But the second is to engage with the US on equal footing. They see China and the US as dividing spheres of influence in their ideal world scenario. Now, we would easily imagine where, for example, the Pacific would fall under that sphere of influence, where Japan, where Korea, where the Philippines, and Southeast Asia would fall under that sort of plan. So I think we have to take that at face value. And, as Masi said very clearly, we have to take what these authoritarian leaders say at face value because it's going to be true. And so I think on China, again, there's only one way, really, to keep their ambitions in check, and the only way is to stand together. There simply isn't any other way. The United States can't do it alone. To be honest, you guys are so far away. Taiwan can't do it alone. Korea can't do it alone. Japan can't do it alone. Australia can't do it alone. The only way it's remotely possible is if all of us stand together now rather than 10 years or 15 years later and reminisce about what could have been and what should have been.
I can't think of a better sentiment on which.
Can I have one more? Just
and I'm sorry, we're out of time, Gary, but you hold that thought for the cocktail party. I've been advised by the management to give you a public service announcement. The buses out front will be there at 6:30 to take you over, or you can walk. It's a nice walk. And I think we've definitely not exhausted this conversation. So please, I look forward to continuing it with you all over lobsters. Please give our panel another round of applause. And thank you so much.
Thank you.